Monday to Friday at 12:30 p.m. only on Bloomberg Quint.
Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines this morning. Asian markets are off to a muted start as investors continue to await clarity on the trade talks. US President Donald Trump, meanwhile, plans to impose more tariffs on certain passenger helicopters, cheese and wine from the EU in retaliation to aircraft subsidies given by the European Union. Oil prices rose for the second day to a 5-month high amid geopolitical tension in major oil producers Iran and Libya. The World Bank expects India's GDP to expand 7.5% in FY20, driven by strong investments and a resilient consumption story. And in a blow to embattled liquor tycoon Vijay Mallya, a UK court has denied him permission to appeal against his extradition order. Let's talk about the action on Wall Street now. After opening with losses, most US indices ended with gains. That is, 2 out of 3 of them. The S&P 500 gained for the 8th day. Now, that continues the longest winning streak that it's been on since October 2017. But the Dow Jones ended with losses led predominantly by the weakness in Boeing. To tell you all about what happened in that session, here's a report by Ranita Young of Bloomberg News.
U.S. stocks are mixed as investors await more progress from the U.S.-China trade war. After trade talks ended last week, GE shares tumbling after J.P. Morgan Chase downgraded the stock, lowered its price target, essentially returning to a bearish view on the stock. BMW shares falling after warning of a charge exceeding $1 billion stemming from an EU probe into alleged collusion. Volkswagen and Daimler shares fell in sympathy with GE. However, Volkswagen shares pared losses shortly after. Bank of America Merrill Lynch raising the price target for advanced micro devices, raising its outlook for 2020-2021 revenue, as well as expecting gross margins to expand in the year 2020. Boeing shares plunging amid this ongoing fallout surrounding the 737 MAX airplane, also dragging the Dow Jones Industrial Average down with it. Now, across the asset class, we saw crude oil extending its advance as an escalation in fighting in OPEC producer Libya overshadowed the biggest increase in U.S. active rigs since last May. The U.S. dollar was down versus a few currency competitors, and the Bloomberg Dollar Index ending lower. And that's a look at your Monday Wall Street action. In New York, I'm Ranita Young for Bloomberg News.
All right, so crude is going to be one of the key watches today, with Brent currently trading above the $71 per barrel mark. But let's take a quick check of the Asian markets. Meanwhile, I'm joined live by Rosalind Chin from the Hong Kong studio. Good morning, Rosalind. Just trying to pick up what the cues are from the equity markets in Asia. How are you looking at it?
Yes, it is a little bit difficult today because the markets are very definitely mixed at this point in time. If we take a look at the broader benchmark, though, the MSCI Asia Pacific Index, that is pointing down, just about flat, but down by 0.08%. So it does give you a little bit of an indication of the broad sentiment in the region. And that's largely because trade concerns are once again raising their heads, but this time in Europe. So this is after Donald Trump, the US president, said that they are going to propose tariffs on a range of EU products, including, for example, cheeses, wines, also some motorbikes, and this is in response to a WTO report which says they're basically saying that the US is harming. The US has harm caused by EU subsidies to Airbus, which of course is a big rival to Boeing. And this, of course, is causing a little bit of a mood dampener here in the region among traders and dampening the risk appetite as well. So it's really not a great mood. Plus, of course, it's a very much of a watch and wait story on the China-US talks as well, but when it comes to trade. So not a lot of impetus here to move things higher when it comes to trading on the markets. So let's take a look around the region. We've got in Japan, the Nikkei down by about 0.1%. The Topics is down by about 0.5%. Hong Kong, Shanghai just coming online a few minutes ago, again trading in the red with the Shanghai Composite down, in fact, more than 0.5% at this hour. So, after a pretty stellar first quarter, investors are also starting to ask how much more is there to go in this rally, and perhaps turning a little bit cautious on that front as well. In Japan, we've got Sony Corp. Now, that is jumping more than 6% right now. It had actually been up higher earlier, and that is on a report that Daniel Loeb, the activist investor hedge fund, Third Point, is building a stake in it as part of a way to sort of change or sway the way the company is being run, and that is Sony. China and Hong Kong, we've just mentioned that the stocks there, although the CSI 300 now, in fact, turning into positive territory, along with the Hang Seng flipping up, just poking its nose up by less than 0.1% though. Australia, we're going to look at Crown Resorts there. That is up by more than 20% right now, and that is after Wynn said that it's in talks to buy it in a deal which is going to value Crown at more than $7 billion. Crown Resorts taking a big jump on that against really a down market in Australia. It had been losing more earlier in the day, but now down by 0.02% as well. So, as you mentioned, of course, oil, one to watch there with the fighting escalating in Libya. So quite a few little things moving at the moment, but overall the sentiment not that great when it comes to trade. Back to you.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Rosalind. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about what Rosalind mentioned right at the start with regard to the trade tensions between the US and the EU. US President Donald Trump is contemplating retaliatory tariffs on passenger helicopters, motorcycles, cheese and wine from the European Union. He believes that the subsidies provided by the EU to Boeing's rival Airbus is causing harm to its interest. Derek Wallbank of Bloomberg News brings you this report.
Well, the USTR has put out a list of about $11 billion worth of products. The lead headline of those is Airbus planes, although this is a broad list that also includes things like wine and British Stilton and French Roquefort cheeses and things like that. So it's a broad group of things. And the U.S. is putting out this preliminary list in response to what they say have been decades of Airbus subsidies, I should say, on their planes, including launch subsidies that help Airbus get brand new planes like the long-distance A350 off the ground. This is a long-running dispute between Airbus and Boeing, the U.S.'s #1 plane maker, and the U.S. has said quite clearly they think that this is enough of that. The WTO is going to make an estimate of how much the damages may or may not be, theoretically by sometime this summer, maybe end of summer, and so the U.S. is going to take that as sort of the overall amount that it's using here. But what it's done right now is put out a list of 11 billion worth of products that it's ready to go with as proposed countervailing duty targets.
All right, now the other big update from Europe. UK Prime Minister Theresa May will head to Brussels later today to seek a further extension of the deadline for the country to leave the European Union. Remember, the EU had earlier granted a 2-week extension from the 29th of March deadline, but now with no deal in sight ahead of the new April 12 deadline, and with Parliament having voted to block a no-deal Brexit, an extension will definitely be required. The question is, how much time will the UK get? Judy Schneider of Bloomberg News brings you this update.
It really is a formality because she is all now about the extension and how long an extension, what kind of extension, what kind of deal can she get from the EU, given that this April 12th deadline, everybody agrees the UK does not want to leave on that date. So at this point, she's going to be meeting in what they're calling coordination meetings that are happening in Brussels. She will be meeting with the German Chancellor Merkel and French President Macron about this, and then there will be a summit later this week with all 27 remaining EU countries about what kind of offer they are going to extend to the UK. Meanwhile, some in her own party are trying to throw her overboard while all this is happening. So there's a lot happening here, but it is the conversation right now is all about the extension.
What kind of extension and the terms within that could be offered to May?
Yeah, that's the real question on the table, Heidi. Partly it's about timing, right? And they're talking about it being perhaps as a long period, a longer period, but it could be anywhere. What we're hearing now is from June 30th of this year, perhaps as long as April 1st of next year, of 2020. And the terms are also a real issue. While at this point, one of the things that the countries are talking about, the member countries of the EU are talking about, is that May and her and Parliament would agree not to disrupt the EU in any way, which would certainly mean that they would have to vote in next month's European Parliament elections. Some, including France, want tougher conditions. They want to make sure that there will not be a disruption of the EU by the UK, which has clearly been wanting to leave. So it's a delicate process, and all 27 member EU countries have to agree at that summit later this week on what that offer will be.
All right, well, that's the latest from the international space. Let's turn now to Agam Vakil, who's joining me now to tell you all about the day's trade and what's happening in the futures and options space. Agam, a few solitary patches of green in the Asian markets this morning, and there were the US markets that closed half in the green and half in the red.
Yeah.
What are we looking at here in India?
Well, consolidation, Alex. We saw the Nifty lose crucial marks yesterday, holding on to 11,600, but well, we really didn't see too much traction coming through, and the SGX Nifty futures is indicating flattish moves today. Zaba suggesting 0.5% cut for the Nifty at 11,600. The mid-cap and the small-cap indices falling in tandem with the benchmarks, with the Nifty banking and the PSU banking index also down by as much as 1%. And when it comes to your ADR, Tata Motors looking at weakness, followed by Vedanta, ICICI Bank and Dr. Reddy's. And we also have, well, mixed cues coming in from Wipro, Infosys and HDFC Bank. It's going to be a big week for Infosys and TCS considering earnings this Friday. But in terms of your FII flows, well, you know, FII flows started to taper now. So we have about 330 odd crores buying coming through from that end. And DIs continue to sell, another 624 odd crores moved out. But when it comes to your contributors, it was once again essentially Reliance Industries which was putting a lot of pressure. In fact, a third of the losses, or rather a fourth of the losses, was from Reliance Industries. So for that, many others also contributing to the weakness that we saw on the index. But moving on to your your futures and options space, and that is where things have changed a little, because now we're starting to see fresh shorts building into the system. 1.5% added in open interest here, and the Bank Nifty is also seeing, well, a little less than 0.5%, but well, shorts all the same. But this is your open interest distribution, and this is, of course, the upcoming week open interest distribution. So you have Maxova in the 11,700 call. Let's move on and talk about the changes. And the 12,000 mark once again stands out here. That is actually the one with the maximum open interest. But moving on, we have the India VIX, which has risen even further. This is perhaps the highlight today in terms of the futures and options space. The India VIX is now back above the mark of 20, and this could be a time to worry. But let's talk about other variables here. And well, your put call ratio, well, on expected lines falling to around 1.38, and we also have Adani Power and IDBI Bank in the F&O ban, along with Jet Airways and Reliance Power. And well, we have new stocks in ban. So wait for DLF, PC Jeweler and Wockhardt, 3 new entrants in the F&O ban. Diwan Housing Finance, on the other hand, moving out, but you know, it's an in and out for DHFL, so we'll be watching out for that. Mahanagar, of course, is the other counter which is seeing a lot of traction, along with PC Jeweler and IGL, so keep an eye on that one. And NIT Tech saw a lot of shorts coming through, and we of course see ESC and Chennai Petro among others. So there's been a lot of mixed move in the markets, yeah, and we're expecting that to continue today as well.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Agam. Well, let's take you through what's making headlines across the globe. Sue Keenan of Bloomberg News brings you the first word headlines.
We start with the U.S., which is proposing to hit Airbus with tariffs in a countermeasure to what it calls, quote, harm caused by EU aircraft subsidiaries. The threat comes nearly 15 years after Washington first complained to the WTO that Airbus was benefiting from billions of dollars in illegal subsidies. A countersuit by the EU found last month that more than $300 million in tax incentives offered by the U.S. to Boeing were unlawful. The Trump administration, meanwhile, is putting pressure on its leading Arab ally, identifying and designating a group of Saudi individuals linked to the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. 16 people are named by the State Department, which makes them and their immediate families ineligible to travel to the United States. The list includes a former aide to Crown Prince Mohammed. UK lawmakers have voted to prevent a no-deal Brexit. This as pressure builds to delay the upcoming divorce. The vote came with EU leaders said to be close to agreement on a delay ahead of a critical summit in Brussels on Wednesday. Now, sources say a compromise is building between France, which is skeptical about extending the UK's membership, and other leaders who think Prime Minister Theresa May should have a year to push a deal through Parliament. Israel heads into election Tuesday with leading parties neck and neck in the polls and Jewish settlements in the West Bank on the agenda. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing a tough challenge from former military chief Benny Gantz and says if he's reelected, he will extend Israeli sovereignty over parts of the West Bank that are home to Jewish settlements. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sue Keenan. This is Bloomberg.
In this market, we're seeing this sort of better news on the sort of trade front, but no resolutions, and discussions around these sort of shock events coming out of Libya. It all suggests you should be taking a bit of care before you sort of set the tone of this being a new one direction rally upwards.
Yeah, and in the background you've still got oil rigs, active rigs jumping in the US as well, something that it felt like the market conveniently ignored overnight. Is the US shale side of things going to come back in as really the swing factor here?
It will remain the key swing factor. I mean, you have to remember that US shale production, we reached 12 million barrels per day, which is beyond anyone's estimations we should do at this point in time. And so the potential is still there for further lifts. There are some issues around the actual access to the rigs and transporting oil, of course. But the bottom line is that US oil continues to surprise us on the upside. These higher prices are giving the frackers the ability to forward sell along the curve, and that all then stimulates further production. So I'd be very cautious about that, saying this is the new start of a new strong rally.
Justin, so the word caution there as we go into my question, as well as the Bloomberg terminal. Hop into my Bloomberg terminal, guys. I want to show you the bullishness that's happening with net longs for WTI here at their highest since October of 2018. Justin, to what degree do you think this might be at an acceptable point, an overblown point, or do you think we're going to start to see something pull back, especially as you just talked about U.S. shale and over the next few weeks with what's happening in Libya?
Well, the net longs is always an interesting one I really like watching, because you're quite right. It's highlighting that we are reaching that point where there's a very extended long position there. But also you have to remember on the reverse, the longs are being generated by the frackers who are being able to sell forward long as well. So there's a lot of forward selling going. That forward selling is generating the cash flow that generates the increase in supply. So this lengthening out of the longs always makes me a little bit cautious about maybe we're reaching the turning point where you're about to see another lift in US supply, which helps to rebalance the market. Also remembering that we've gone through a period of time where there's a lot of worries about the global growth, global trade, some settling down now, and the reality is we're still seeing a lot of tensions around the global environment, particularly around you thinking about the nexus between US growth and Chinese growth, that suggests you should take a bit of caution before assuming we are just on a long path here.
Okay, some of the stocks that you need to watch out for today. Delta Corp came out with its fourth quarter number yesterday. Decent set of numbers. Revenues were up 19%, profit was up 25%, the EBITDA was up 30%, which meant EBITDA margins at 43% versus 39% last time around. No doubt they had an exceptional gain of 4 crores this time around. The gaming revenue operations were up almost 20%, but the licensing fees was up almost 2.5 times. Sun Pharma, their arm will replace Aditya Medisales in selling drugs in India. There will be a one-time hit as far as the profit and sales are concerned for FY19, which will be reflected in the fourth quarter numbers. And the Atlas Global's trading deal has been completed. So that is something they believe that no impact will come in on the business this time around. Pan-Asia probably will be the stock of the day today. Piramal Enterprises and Bain Capital invest 992 crores in the company. The fund will acquire 10.4% stake in the company, and the company has said that they will require this money to pay off certain lenders, a one-time settlement that is there, and for growth capital. DLF GIC sells in 3.8% stake in the company, so CF stake falls in from 4.11% to 0.3%. Society General acquired 1.17% stake out of what GIC sold in. Fortis has said that they have started to looking for buyers to purchase their 28% stake in the Singapore-based RHT Holdings. Nothing, it's just a preliminary in nature. There's nothing that's officially come out as of now. Dilip Bilkon, the analyst meet, they're saying that at least in the near term they see sluggish market condition, but the near-term outlook looks medium-term outlook looks robust. Guidance for debt is net debt equity ratio of less than 1 by FY19 end and 0.7 to 0.8 by FY20. And finally, Asian Paints fire breaks out at the Andhra Pradesh manufacturing facility. Remember, it's a new facility. 2,000 crore capex was taken at this facility, and the company says that the manufacturing operations have been affected, but they see no impact as far as the financials is concerned. So these are some of the stocks that you need to watch out today.
On the big brokerage calls for the day, first we have a CLSA on Asian Paints. So the brokerage has downgraded its rating on the stock to sell from an outperform and has also cut target price on Asian Paints to 1,400 rupees from 1,565. Now, according to the brokerage, there are multiple signs emerging which are pointing towards a slowdown, which would mean weak consumer sentiments. Now, this will be a concern for the paint industry given the fairly high level of discretion. Now, crude oil prices have also risen sharply. There were increasing concerns on margins of the company. Now, on the back of these two concerns, the brokerage has cut its EPS estimates on Asian Paints by nearly 2 to 5%. Lastly, it says that the stock is trading at a significant premium not only to its own history but also to broader indices, consumer staples company, global paint companies and global internet stocks. The second we have is on Jet Airways, where Edelweiss has downgraded its rating on the stock to reduce from an hold rating and has also cut the target price to 177 from 229. Now, it has downgraded because of various reasons. Nearly 3/4 of Jet's original fleet has been grounded. Flight cancellations have continued to dent its image, and its precious slots are being surrendered, says the brokerage. But despite all these factors, the stock price has remained firm in the recent past. Now, the brokerage is expecting a weak fourth quarter of financial year 2019 from the company, mainly due to this cut in capacity. Lastly, it says that the rising yield is aiding the entire industry, and it advises investors to switch over to Indigo and SpiceJet from Jet Airways.
Well, there are several stories that you'll find on the website, all the breaking news, in fact, and the analysis of that breaking news, all available on the website, bloombergquint.com. Here are just a couple of stories that you'll find if you look at up this morning. First up, telecom operator Bharti Airtel has received SEBI approval to raise up to 25,000 crore rupees through a rights issue. Remember, the board had earlier approved the rights issue to raise up to 25,000 crore through issuance of fully paid up shares at a price of 220 rupees per share and an additional 7,000 crore rupees through foreign currency perpetual bonds. And in a blow to embattled liquor tycoon Vijay Mallya, the UK High Court or a judge of that UK High Court has denied Mallya permission to appeal against his extradition order to India. He's facing charges, remember, for an alleged fraud and money laundering charges amounting to 9,000 crore rupees. That's all you need to know going into trade today. But like I said, there's a lot more on the website bloombergquint.com. In fact, a lot of action coming up over the course of the day. So do stay tuned. This is Bloomberg Quint.